May 1942. The North African campaign was reaching a critical point. The German Afrika Korps under Erwin Rommel was pushing toward Egypt. American forces had only recently entered combat in North Africa. American equipment was new to the battlefield. German commanders wanted to know what the Americans had brought to fight. In the desert near Gazala, a German patrol captured an American vehicle. It was small. It was open. It had 4 doors. It looked crude compared to German vehicles. The soldiers who captured it called it a Jeep. They did not realize what they had found. They did not understand that this small vehicle represented something far larger than its appearance suggested. They did not know that examination of this vehicle would force German military leadership to confront uncomfortable truths about American industrial power. The Jeep was brought to a German testing facility in North Africa. Technical officers were assigned to examine it. Their initial assessment was dismissive. The vehicle appeared primitive. The construction seemed simple. German engineers had refined every component of their own vehicles through years of development. German vehicles were masterpieces of mechanical engineering. The Jeep looked like it had been assembled by amateurs. But the dismissal was premature. When German technicians began to disassemble the Jeep, they discovered something remarkable. Every part was standardized. Every nut and bolt was identical to thousands of others. The engine was simple but powerful. The transmission was straightforward but effective. The suspension was robust. The electrical system was reliable. The vehicle was not primitive. It was designed for production. The Germans measured the specifications. The Jeep was a quarter-ton vehicle. It weighed approximately 1,100 kilograms fully loaded. It had a 4-cylinder engine producing 60 horsepower. It could tow another quarter-ton trailer. It could traverse rough terrain. It could ford water. It had a turning radius that allowed navigation in confined spaces. It could carry 4 men and equipment. It had a fuel capacity sufficient for extended operations. The Germans compared these specifications to their own light vehicle. The Kubelwagen was Germany's answer to the Jeep. Ferdinand Porsche had designed it. German engineers considered it a masterpiece. The Kubelwagen weighed slightly less than the Jeep. Its engine produced only 25 horsepower. That was half the power of the American vehicle. The Kubelwagen could carry 4 men, but its performance in rough terrain was not as reliable as the Jeep's. The Kubelwagen was more refined in appearance. It was more comfortable for the crew, but it was less capable. The German test report concluded that the Jeep was more powerful, more reliable, and more capable in rough terrain than the Kubelwagen. This was not the conclusion German military leaders wanted to read. They had been told that German engineering was superior to American engineering. They had been told that German manufacturing was the finest in the world. The Jeep's superiority contradicted both assertions. The German analysis went deeper. The technicians examined the production methods. They looked at how the components were manufactured. They analyzed the tolerance standards. They measured the precision of the manufacturing. They discovered something that troubled them profoundly. The Jeep's components were manufactured to identical specifications. Each part was interchangeable with every other part of the same type. If a bolt broke, any identical bolt could replace it. If a carburetor failed, any identical carburetor could replace it. If an engine component wore out, any identical component could replace it. This was revolutionary manufacturing thinking. German manufacturing was precision-based. Each component was handcrafted to fit with other components. If a part broke, a replacement had to be handmade to fit that specific vehicle. German manufacturing was superior in quality, but limited in speed. American manufacturing was based on standardization. Each component was identical. Replacement was instantaneous. The vehicle could be repaired quickly. German engineers understood the implications. American factories could produce Jeeps much faster than German factories could produce Kubelwagens. American factories could mass-produce replacements for broken components. American production lines could operate continuously without the delays that German production suffered. American vehicles could be produced in numbers that German factories could never match. The German military command commissioned a comprehensive analysis of the Jeep. Engineers from Mercedes-Benz and Porsche participated in the study. Dr. Ferdinand Porsche himself examined captured Jeeps. The analysis included performance testing. Jeeps were driven over different terrain types. They were tested in sand. They were tested in mud. They were tested in rocky ground. They were tested in heat. They were tested in cold. The performance data was compared to Kubelwagen performance data. The Jeep outperformed the Kubelwagen in almost every condition. In sand, it was faster. In mud, it had better traction. In rocky ground, it climbed better. In heat, the engine ran cooler. In cold, the engine started more reliably. The test pilots reported that the Jeep was easier to drive. The steering was lighter. The suspension was more comfortable. The visibility was better. The controls were more accessible. One test pilot, Major Friedrich Hartmann, provided a detailed report. He drove a captured Jeep for 200 kilometers. He drove it over terrain that replicated combat conditions. He drove it over conditions where Kubelwagen would have struggled. He reported that the Jeep handled all conditions with ease. He noted that the 60-horsepower engine provided acceleration and climbing ability that the 25-horsepower Kubelwagen could not match. He concluded that the Jeep was a superior vehicle in every respect except for comfort and appearance. Hartmann's report went to German High Command. The implications were clear. The Americans had developed a light military vehicle that was superior to the German equivalent. The Americans had achieved this superiority through standardized manufacturing. The Americans could produce these vehicles in large numbers. German factories could not match American production rates. The German response was to increase Kubelwagen production. But German factories were already at capacity. German production lines were stretched thin. Adding more Kubelwagens meant reducing production of other vehicles. Tank production would suffer. Truck production would suffer. Aircraft production would suffer. German military command faced a dilemma. They could not match American production. They could not abandon the Kubelwagen. They could not improve the Kubelwagen's performance enough to match the Jeep. Intelligence reports began to arrive from German spies in the United States. These reports provided production numbers. American factories were producing Jeeps at a rate that shocked German military planners. The reports indicated that Willys Overland and Ford were producing over 500 Jeeps per day. By 1942, over 200,000 Jeeps had been produced. By 1943, the number had risen to 400,000. By the end of the war, the number would exceed 640,000. German production of the Kubelwagen never exceeded 50,000 vehicles total. This meant that American factories were producing Jeeps at a rate 12 times faster than German factories could produce Kubelwagens. American factories could replace worn-out vehicles by the thousands. German factories could barely keep up with replacements for damaged vehicles. German military leaders tried to acquire captured Jeeps. Every operational unit was instructed to acquire any American Jeeps captured from enemy forces. Jeeps were valuable. They could be used immediately without modification. They were preferred by German soldiers because they performed better than Kubelwagens. German units fought over captured Jeeps. Senior officers demanded access to captured Jeeps. Junior officers complained about the shortage of captured Jeeps. The demand for captured Jeeps far exceeded supply. By 1943, German military planners recognized an uncomfortable truth. American industrial capacity was producing military equipment at rates that German factories could never match. A single American factory could produce more vehicles than Germany's entire automotive industry. Multiple American factories were producing tanks. Multiple American factories were producing aircraft. Multiple American factories were producing trucks. Multiple American factories were producing Jeeps. The total American military vehicle production dwarfed German production. The Jeep became a symbol of this disparity. It represented American mass production. It represented American standardization. It represented American industrial power. For German soldiers, seeing a captured Jeep meant seeing evidence that they were fighting an enemy with unlimited resources. For German commanders, studying the Jeep meant understanding that victory through attrition was impossible. Germany could not outproduce America. In February 1945, German High Command commissioned a final analysis of the Jeep. The war was nearly lost. Germany was defending its homeland. American forces were advancing from the west. Soviet forces were advancing from the east. German military leadership was assessing what had gone wrong. The Jeep analysis was part of a larger postmortem about German military failures. The final report concluded, "The American Jeep represents the essence of American industrial methodology. American manufacturing prioritizes production speed over individual component refinement. This methodology has proven superior to German manufacturing methodology in a prolonged conflict. The Jeep's simple design allows rapid production. The Jeep's standardization allows easy replacement of components. The Jeep's reliability allows continuous operation. These qualities, individually impressive, combine to produce a military advantage that German manufacturing cannot overcome. The Jeep is not a superior vehicle due to revolutionary design. The Jeep is a superior vehicle due to American production capacity." The report went on to explain the strategic implications. Germany had lost the industrial war before the first shots were fired. German military planners had assumed that quality would overcome quantity. They had assumed that German engineering would prove decisive. They had assumed that disciplined German soldiers would defeat less trained American soldiers. All these assumptions had proven wrong. American quantity had overcome German quality. American production had proven decisive. German discipline could not overcome American industrial power. The Jeep's real significance was not as a vehicle. The Jeep was significant as a symbol. It represented everything about American industrial society that gave America the ability to wage total war. Every Jeep represented not just that vehicle, but the factories that produced it, the raw materials that supplied it, the workers who built it, and the transportation system that delivered it to the front. Every captured Jeep represented an American replacement waiting in a factory to take its place. German soldiers came to fear the Jeep, not because it was a terrible weapon. German soldiers feared the Jeep because it represented something they could not overcome. It represented American abundance. Every Jeep they destroyed would be replaced by 10 more Jeeps. Every factory they bombed would be replaced by new factories in America where bombs could not reach. Every Jeep they captured could be used for a few days before running out of parts that could not be replaced. By 1944, captured Jeeps were prized possessions. German special operations units used captured Jeeps for infiltration missions. During the Battle of the Bulge, German commandos dressed in American uniforms drove captured Jeeps to penetrate American lines. The operation was designed to sow confusion and gather intelligence. The German High Command authorized Otto Skorzeny to acquire as many captured Jeeps as possible for the operation. German supply officers searched rear areas and contacted every unit that might have captured American vehicles. They managed to acquire approximately 30 Jeeps. 30 Jeeps was a pittance. The German High Command wanted 100 Jeeps for the operation, but 100 Jeeps could not be found. American forces had too many Jeeps. German forces had too few opportunities to capture them intact. The shortage forced Skorzeny to improvise. He disguised German vehicles to look like American Jeeps. The deception was limited, but it was all he could do with the resources available. The German commandos who received captured Jeeps for the operation reported that the vehicles performed excellently. They had speed. They had maneuverability. They attracted no special attention because Jeeps were ubiquitous on the American side. The commandos could have used 100 more Jeeps if they had been available, but they were not available. There were not enough captured Jeeps to satisfy German operational needs. The shortage of captured Jeeps became a symbol of German desperation. The Wehrmacht had conquered Europe with tanks and motorized columns. Now, they were reduced to scrounging for captured American Jeeps because German production could not meet demand. The situation was humiliating. It demonstrated that the military advantage had passed to the Allies. It demonstrated that German military power, while still formidable, was being crushed by American industrial power. After the war, German officers who had analyzed the Jeep reflected on its significance. They recognized that the Jeep had represented something deeper than a light military vehicle. It had represented American society. It represented American democracy. It represented American industrial organization. It represented the ability of American factories to produce goods in quantities that seemed miraculous to German observers. German officers who had despaired during the war began to understand why they had despaired. They had faced not just an enemy military, but an entire enemy society mobilized for total war. The Jeep's production figures were staggering. Over 640,000 Jeeps were produced during the war. This meant that the United States had produced more Jeeps than Germany had produced Kubelwagens, trucks, and light vehicles combined. American factories produced enough Jeeps to equip multiple armies. American factories produced enough Jeeps to equip Soviet forces through Lend-Lease. American factories produced enough Jeeps to replace any losses and still have surplus. German manufacturing, in contrast, was stretched thin. German factories were under constant bombing. German raw material supplies were limited. German production was declining as the war progressed. German military vehicles were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. German soldiers fought without adequate transportation. German logistical systems broke down because vehicles were not available. German tactical mobility declined because there were not enough vehicles to move troops and supplies. The Jeep represented everything about American industrial society that the Axis powers could not overcome. It was simple. It was reliable. It was easy to produce. It was designed for a society that valued speed of production over individual component perfection. German vehicles were designed for a society that valued precision and quality above all else. In a prolonged conflict, the American approach proved superior. In a prolonged conflict, you needed more vehicles, not better vehicles. The American Jeep provided both more vehicles and adequate quality. The German Kubelwagen provided quality, but could not be produced in sufficient quantities. By the end of the war, the Jeep had become iconic. It was recognized everywhere. Soldiers from every Allied nation knew the Jeep. Soviet soldiers received Jeeps through Lend-Lease. British soldiers used Jeeps. French soldiers used captured Jeeps. Chinese forces received Jeeps. The Jeep connected Allied forces across continents. It was the vehicle of the modern military. It was the vehicle that represented American industrial power, translated into military logistics. German military theorists had believed that German military superiority would overcome American numerical advantage. They had believed that German engineering would prove decisive. They had believed that German discipline would overcome American abundance. The Jeep proved them wrong. A simple light vehicle, mass-produced in vast quantities, provided the enemy with a logistical advantage that German military power could not overcome. The Jeep was not a weapon of war in the traditional sense. It was a weapon of logistics. It represented the victory of American industrial organization over German military theory. The captured Jeep that German technicians analyzed in North Africa in 1942 had told them everything they needed to know. German analysts had recognized that American manufacturing was superior in the one area that mattered most in a prolonged conflict: production speed and standardization. German military planners had chosen not to listen. They had continued to believe that quality would overcome quantity. They had continued to believe that German engineering would prove decisive. They had continued to believe that the war could be won through military superiority. The Jeep proved them wrong.